When people walk through an old European town and feel disoriented, they often blame themselves. They assume they're distracted, bad with directions, or not paying enough attention. But psychology tells a different story. In many historic cities, confusion is a predictable cognitive response to environments that were never designed for clarity. These cities were not built to help strangers navigate them. They were built to protect residents, control movement, and adapt to centuries of unpredictable change. Streets weren't planned in advance. They emerged slowly, shaped by geography, politics, trade routes, and defense strategies. What feels charming today was once practical survival logic. Here are some cities that feel like puzzles you have to solve, and others that quietly guide you without you realizing it. Venice does not behave like a normal city. There are no long, straight roads that guide your movement. There are no dominant visual corridors that help you predict what comes next. Instead, Venice is a network of narrow passageways, canals, bridges, and sudden open squares that appear without warning. From a psychological standpoint, Venice constantly interrupts your brain's attempt to form a coherent spatial map. Human navigation relies on something called cognitive mapping. Your brain subconsciously builds a mental model of an environment based on repeated patterns, orientation cues, and predictable pathways. In modern cities, that happens quickly. In Venice, it rarely stabilizes. Streets bend sharply or end abruptly. Visual symmetry is rare. Canals create natural barriers that force detours. Many walkways look nearly identical, with repeating textures, colors, and building heights. This visual repetition makes it harder for your brain to differentiate locations. Even landmarks, which normally anchor memory, are inconsistent. Churches, bridges, and squares appear frequently, but they don't follow a clear hierarchy. One church doesn't obviously signal central importance over another. This weakens your brain's ability to prioritize reference points. Historically, this was intentional. Venice developed as a defensive city-state. Its irregular layout made it difficult for invaders to move quickly or understand the city's structure. Confusion was a feature, not a flaw. Narrow alleys slowed enemies. Dead ends trapped them. Water routes could be controlled or blocked. For residents, this layout worked because they learned the city through repetition, not logic. They memorized routes rather than understanding the city as a whole. Turn-by-turn memory replaced spatial overview. For visitors, the experience is very different. Psychological studies show that environments with low predictability increase cognitive load. Your brain has to work harder just to move from one place to another. This constant effort leads to mental fatigue, even if you're not consciously stressed. That's why people often report feeling oddly exhausted after walking through Venice, even if they enjoyed it. The brain never relaxes or switches into automatic navigation mode. Every step requires attention. Interestingly, this confusion often creates two opposing emotional reactions. Some people feel anxious and frustrated. Others feel enchanted and absorbed. The difference comes down to tolerance for cognitive uncertainty. Some brains enjoy environments that resist understanding. Others crave structure. But regardless of emotional response, the mental effort is real. One of the most disorienting aspects of Venice is the lack of directional continuity. In many cities, even old ones, there's a sense of north, south, center, or edge. In Venice, those concepts are non existent. Canals twist in ways that obscure orientation. Bridges change elevation unexpectedly. Streets curve without signaling where they lead. Even maps feel abstract because routes that look close on paper can require long detours. This breaks a core navigation strategy the brain relies on: vector based movement. Humans prefer to move in straight lines toward goals. When forced into constant detours, the brain experiences friction. Over time, people may feel tense, impatient, or mentally overloaded without knowing why. This is why Venice can feel overwhelming during peak travel times. The environment demands constant adjustment, and crowds amplify that demand. Yet, for all its confusion, Venice has a strange internal consistency. Locals don't think of the city globally, they think in micro-territories. This highlights an important psychological principle. A city doesn't need to make sense globally to work for residents, it only needs to support routine. But visitors don't have routines, they need clarity, and Venice offers very little. Now let's compare that with another old European city that evolved organically but feels psychologically different. Prague is also ancient. Its streets curve, its districts overlap, and its architecture spans centuries. Yet most people find Prague far easier to navigate than Venice. The difference lies in how the city communicates orientation. Prague has strong dominant landmarks that remain visible across large portions of the city. The Vltava River acts as a natural access. The castle complex sits elevated, constantly reminding you where you are. Major squares and bridges are visually distinct and emotionally memorable. From a cognitive perspective, these elements act as anchors. Anchors allow the brain to recalibrate position even when street layouts are irregular. You may not know the exact path you're taking, but you know where you are in relation to something stable. This dramatically reduces mental strain. Meanwhile, psychological research shows that people navigate better when environments offer a balance between complexity and reference points. Prague achieves this balance almost accidentally. Unlike Venice, Prague grew around power centers rather than defensive confusion. Religious, political, and commercial hubs became focal points. Streets bent around them, but they never lost prominence. This creates a layered navigation experience. On a local level, streets may feel winding or unpredictable. On a global level, orientation remains intact. You might wander, but you don't feel lost in a threatening way. There's always a sense that you could reorient yourself if needed. That sense of recoverability matters. The brain tolerates complexity much better when it believes mistakes are reversible. Another psychological difference lies in visual differentiation. Prague's neighborhoods often have distinct visual identities. Architectural styles shift noticeably, color palettes change, and elevation varies. These differences help the brain encode location specific memories. Venice, by contrast, is visually cohesive to the point of monotony. While beautiful, its repetition makes it harder for the brain to mark progress. You may walk for 10 minutes and feel like you haven't gone anywhere because the scenery hasn't changed meaningfully. Memory research shows that distinct environments improve spatial recall. When places look different, the brain stores them more efficiently. Prague benefits from this, but Venice resists it. This is why people often remember Prague in segments: Old Town, Lesser Town, Castle District. Each feels mentally separate. But Venice often mixes them all into one continuous experience. Neither approach is better. They simply produce different psychological effects. However, it's important to understand that neither Venice nor Prague failed at urban design. They succeeded at the priorities of their time. Before modern transportation, clarity wasn't important. Defense, density, and proximity mattered more. People didn't need to traverse the entire city daily. They lived locally. Markets, churches, and homes clustered tightly. Navigation was learned socially, not cognitively. You followed people and you memorized routines. Modern visitors bring modern expectations into ancient environments. We expect cities to explain themselves, but old cities never intended to. This mismatch creates the maze-like feeling. Your brain expects structure, but the city offers history instead. Walking through cities like Venice and Prague activates different mental systems than walking through modern cities. Attention increases, environmental scanning intensifies, and memory works harder. This can be stimulating or draining, depending on the person. Some people feel alive in these environments, but others feel overwhelmed. Neither reaction is wrong. They reflect differences in cognitive preference. What matters is recognizing that the city is shaping your experience as much as your mindset is. Old European towns don't just have history, they impose it on your nervous system. When you move through an old European town into a planned city like Barcelona or New York, the difference is immediate, even if you can't explain it. Your body relaxes before your mind catches up. Walking feels lighter, and decisions feel easier. You stop checking maps as often and stop second-guessing your direction. This isn't because these cities are newer or more modern. It's because they were built under a completely different philosophy. Instead of growing slowly through survival and habit, they were designed with intention. And that intention aligns closely with how the human brain prefers to process space. Planned cities reduce uncertainty, communicate structure, reward prediction, and psychologically, that changes everything. Barcelona is one of the clearest examples of a city that explains itself as you move through it. While the medieval core still reflects organic growth, the Eixample district represents a turning point in urban design. When Ildefonso Cerdà designed Eixample in the 19th century, the goal wasn't beauty alone. It was health, movement, and mental clarity. Streets were laid out in a grid, but not a rigid one. Blocks were uniform, but intersections were softened. Visibility was prioritized as light and air were treated as essential resources. From a psychological standpoint, Barcelona reduces cognitive friction. Cognitive friction is the mental effort required to understand what comes next. In Venice, friction is constant. In Prague, it fluctuates. In Barcelona, it drops rapidly after minimal exposure. After walking just a few blocks, your brain starts predicting the city correctly. You understand block length. You understand intersections. You understand where major avenues will likely appear. Even when you don't know where you're going, you know how to recover if you're wrong. This sense of recoverability is crucial. Psychology shows that people feel calmer in environments where mistakes feel correctable. In Barcelona, wrong turns are not punished. They're minor delays. This reduces anxiety and increases exploratory behavior. People walk more and engage socially more because their mental resources are no longer consumed by navigation. Take, for instance, Barcelona's design. The structure was made to minimize visual confusion. Streets are wide, sight lines are long, and intersections allow you to see multiple directions at once. This supports something called anticipatory navigation. Anticipatory navigation allows the brain to plan movement before reaching a decision point. In chaotic cities, decisions happen suddenly. In planned cities, they unfold gradually. That difference conserves mental energy. Research in environmental psychology shows that predictable environments reduce activity in stress related neural circuits. This doesn't mean planned cities are emotionally neutral, it means they don't constantly demand vigilance. Barcelona lets your brain shift from survival mode into experience mode. At a point, you're no longer asking, "Where am I?" You're asking, "What's around me?" That thought alone changes how people remember cities. Barcelona is often remembered as spacious, breathable, and humane. That's the power of cognition. Barcelona teaches you how it works gently, New York teaches you aggressively. Manhattan's grid is unapologetic, streets run east to west, avenues run north to south, numbers replace names, and the city communicates direction constantly. From a psychological perspective, New York is one of the easiest large cities in the world to mentally model. Even first-time visitors can orient themselves quickly. You don't need to understand the city globally to move confidently within it. You only need to understand the rules. Numbers go up, avenues change direction, and everything else follows. This creates what psychologists call rule-based navigation. Rule-based navigation is cognitively efficient. Instead of memorizing routes, the brain applies logic. This frees up working memory and reduces stress. It also creates a strong sense of control. Studies consistently show that perceived control over an environment reduces anxiety, even in loud or crowded spaces. This explains a paradox about New York. It's noisy, dense, and overwhelming, yet many people feel surprisingly confident moving through it. The city may be intense, but it's legible. New York's clarity comes with a psychological cost. The same grid that makes navigation easy can reduce emotional texture. Neighborhoods can feel interchangeable, streets repeat endlessly, and discovery feels rarer because surprise is minimized. In old European towns, discovery happens accidentally. In New York, it often happens intentionally. This affects how people bond with the city. In a way, psychological attachment tends to form faster in environments that offer mystery and variation. No wonder many urban psychologists cite Barcelona as one of the most psychologically comfortable large cities in the world. When you compare old European towns to planned cities, you're really comparing two philosophies of human movement. Old cities assume familiarity, they assume routine, they assume community memory. All in all, they were built for people who didn't need maps because they didn't leave their neighborhoods often. Planned cities assume strangers, movement, and constant flow. They are built to be understood quickly by people who don't belong yet. Your brain reacts differently to each assumption. In Venice, your brain works harder because the city withholds information. In Prague, your brain negotiates complexity using landmarks. In Barcelona, your brain learns patterns. In New York, your brain applies rules. Each mode activates different cognitive systems. This also explains why people disagree so strongly about cities. Some people thrive in organic environments. They enjoy unpredictability since they like feeling absorbed. Their brains find stimulation in complexity. For them, Venice feels alive. On the other hand, others crave clarity. They feel stressed by constant decision making. They prefer environments that fade into the background. For them, Barcelona or New York feels liberating. These preferences are linked to personality traits, tolerance for ambiguity, and cognitive processing styles. Highly analytical minds often prefer structured cities. Visually sensitive or emotionally exploratory minds may prefer organic ones. The city doesn't change, but the brain does. In the modern world, people are already cognitively overloaded. Phones, notifications, schedules, and information constantly demand attention. When a city adds navigational stress on top of that, the load compounds. It's no wonder old cities feel magical on vacation, but exhausting long term. Planned cities reduce one layer of stress. They don't demand constant orientation. This allows residents to conserve mental energy for work, relationships, and creativity. Urban stress is rarely about noise or crowds alone. It's about uncertainty. So, cities that reduce uncertainty feel calmer, even when they're busy. Ultimately, old European towns teach patience and surrender. Planned cities teach efficiency and confidence. Neither is accidental. When a city feels like a maze, it's only historical, not broken. Understanding this changes how you experience travel, how you judge places, and how you understand your own reactions. If a city drains you, it could be the cognitive demand of the environment itself. And once you see that, you stop blaming yourself for feeling lost. Now, do you believe cities shape the way we think more than we realize, or are we simply adapting without noticing? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this video helped you see why some cities feel like mazes while others just make sense, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology behind the places we move through every day.